I find it funny that every time I speak to an anti-feminist, whether it be Candace Owens or some incel that stalks my page, not only are their arguments extremely weak and totally empirically unfounded, but also there's no praxis. They never take their claims to its logical end, so let's do that today. If we define feminism as the equality of opportunity between genders across all realms, I'm talking political power, social status, and economic attainment. And you're an anti-feminist, meaning that you don't believe there should be equality of opportunity between the genders. Okay, so what's next? What are the next steps? What of the products of feminism do you want to roll back? Like what legal changes? What is your end goal here? We never talk about that. We talk a lot about bioessentialism, which biologists and sociologists and psychologists collectively disagree with. But we don't talk about what change your ideology wants to make. Candace Owens says that we cannot trust what women want. They're simply being misled by the culture to want certain things, to want a job, to want to leave the home, to want to secure themselves financially. And we also can't trust the happiness that they report. All of these millions of women, they're just confused. According to my unfounded biological theory, they don't know any better. If that's the case and women are like children, shouldn't the law be protecting them? Shouldn't we be forcing these people who don't know any better to stay inside, to stop working? Shouldn't you lose your job? The logical end to conservative logic in regards to feminism is sexist legislation. They just can't say that yet, not until they feel safe, not until we fully accept their delusions. This is why it's so important to talk to these people, to get to the foundational tenets of their beliefs, fallacies like appealing to biology and authority and tradition. They're hoping that we don't ask too many questions, that we never ask why, because that would cause their belief system to fall apart.
So this debate between Candace Owens and 20 feminists, which is what I think it is called, is, I guess, making the rounds on social media. And this young lady, Zena, was one of the debaters who debated Candace Owens. And I guess she has this post-debate thing now where I guess they're just making content and trying to capitalize on it. And it's this. She did the same thing because Princella did a post-interview video as well, where she was basically saying that Candace is allergic to facts. And I find it very peculiar that the same thing that Princella was accusing Candace of is what Zena did in her video. So Princella was criticizing Candace for the fact that Candace did not use the dictionary or the textbook definition of the word patriarchy. She used the functional definition. And so Princella now basically, instead of addressing that, right, because Candace Owens was the person who's essentially, she was the debater, so to speak. So obviously she would set the frame of reference for the debate. If we're going to define a word, she would be the one to say it, because you're debating her, so you would have to debate her based on what she is bringing to the table in terms of her understanding of whatever. So you can debate the understanding. Obviously, if the understanding is flawed, you have to first show how and why it is flawed, and then bring us back to what the facts are. You cannot totally ignore the context in which the debate is being had and then set up a straw man and argue that, which is what Princella did. Now, Zuniga, right, she ironically did the same thing that Candace Owens did in this video. She gave her own definition of what feminism is. And the definition that she gave for feminism is the equality of opportunity between genders across all realms, and that includes social status, political power, and economic attainment. But that is not the historical definition of the word feminism, right? The earliest definition of the feminist movement, right, they had goals that they wanted to achieve. So we're looking at the right to vote, own property, sign contracts, work, and protection against gender discrimination under the law. And if we're being honest, most Western countries have already achieved these goals. There's a bit of hypocrisy, here, but people are generally, content to be in their own echo chambers, which make for great content here on TikTok, but it doesn't do much for our level of critical thinking as human beings, right? She mentioned equality of opportunity across all realms, which is very vague. Like, what does that mean? I mean, her definition of feminism sounds nice, right? Equality of opportunity across all realms, but politically, we already live in a system where women can run for office, they can vote, and they actually have power. If a woman becomes a senator or a CEO, she has the same legal authority as a man in the same role. So, what is the issue? Is she arguing that we need an exact numerical parity? Meaning, does it mean that every field must have a 50-50 split in terms of male-female ratio? Is that what she's talking about? Because then that, like, what about qualification? What about people's choice, right? And then we would no longer be talking about equality of opportunity. We'll be entering the territory of a kind of dictatorship of sorts, right? Now, she said, she also mentioned social status. Social status. What does that mean? Like, equality of social status. Should the law control how we view each other socially? Is that what you're suggesting, Zena? Like, what do you mean, equality of social status? Because I do not believe that is very realistic. It seems almost authoritarian, because you're going to tell me that I must give a woman who is a CEO or a senator or a congresswoman the same respect and adoration or whatever, but those come with your performance in the role. If you are in the role of a CEO and you're doing a terrible job, nobody's going to respect you, whether you're a man or a woman. Like, what the hell? So these things are subjective. There's no way, how do you legislate that? Because obviously what you're advocating here is that there should be legal protections. But you cannot tell people how to feel. You cannot police people's opinions. You cannot police people's feelings. You cannot police people's perspectives. You can't do that. So how are you going to ensure from a legal point of view that women have the same social status as men? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Like, I mean, if a woman in the same role, unless maybe she's talking about pay, but if a woman in the same role with the same experience is paid less than a man, that is already illegal in most places. So, like, what exactly are you arguing here? Like, what is this new feminist movement about? Because the original women's movement, or whatever you call feminism now, the stuff that they wanted to achieve, they have already achieved it. So I don't, what's going on, what is really going on now? Like, what's this feminist movement about? Because even if you can say, well, there is evidence that women in the same position are paid less than men, then that is not a law issue, because the law already there to say that that's not supposed to happen, but people will break the law. That's why we have a court system, and that's why we have jails and prisons, because people will break the law. So you could argue perhaps that there is an enforcement issue, but that is not something that requires a total ideological overhaul. It's just that, the law probably needs more teeth or whatever the case might be. And it is still subjective, because no two people are the same. No two people are the same. If you advertise a job and 50 people show up, there is no way you're going to find two candidates who have the same exact thing. If you find that one of the resumes is probably doctored. No two people have the same experience, same qualification, no two people have the same resume. That does not make any sense. So it's kind of hard. And then remember, at the decision stage, the company is choosing what is best for the company based on the perception that the interviewer had of the interviewees. And it's not just what is on you. That's why you have an interview, because your resume doesn't tell everything. Is your performance in the interview, and how are you? Interviews are not typically recorded, so how are you going to determine that the decision that the interviewer or the interviewers arrived at broke the law? How are you going to do that? One of the strongest tells that an argument is shallow is when it avoids the obvious follow-up question. Okay, then what? Zena asks anti-feminists what laws or legal changes that they would make, but she doesn't ask herself the same question, like, what exactly is the feminist movement still trying to change? If the laws are already in place for equal rights, voting, what does feminism want? No, like, what do you guys want? She never really get into that. She critiques conservatives for their supposed endgame, right? Basically saying, oh, you want to roll back women's right to vote and all the accomplishments that the women's movement have achieved since, the 1800s up to this point. But while she's pushing back, she is not telling us, okay, but what, like, you guys are out here saying a bunch of stuff and calling people names and debating all over the place, but what do you stand for? What exactly do you want? Because the stuff, when you talk about feminism, the stuff that feminism set out to accomplish have already been accomplished. Women can vote, they can own property, they can, they can do whatever they want. At this point, there is nothing really there's no laws really on the books that disproportionately affect women right now. Like, so, what do you guys want? Then, she weaponizes science while simultaneously dismissing it. She says that bioessentialism is discredited by scientists, and that people who refer to biological sex differences are just using fake science. Bioessentialism is a big ass word. So what exactly does it mean? Bioessentialism is the idea that men and women are fundamentally different because of biology, and that these differences should determine what they do in life. For example, a bioessentialist might say, since women are more naturally nurturing, then they are better suited for caregiving roles. Or since men are more logical and aggressive, then they are more suited for leadership roles and technical fields. And this view tends to see gender roles as rooted in biology and not culture. Obviously, Zena disagrees with this and says that it is fake science. Cool. But then she turns around and makes sweeping psychological claims, like saying that women who want to work or leave the home are just as fine, and conservatives are lying about their happiness. So which is it? Are they supposed to trust psychology or not? You can be dismissing science on one hand and then using it to support your argument on the other hand. You have to be consistent. Now, to be fair, I don't think that she was being literal in that part where she claims that she imagines women being forced to go back in the home. I think it was more of a reductio ad absurdum kind of argument that she was using to push back at Candace Owens' logic to, to the extreme to expose what she sees as its natural outcome. Like, she's asking anti-feminists what is their endgame. But I would put back the question to her, what is your endgame? Because at the end of the day, you can't just debate. We have to come to a common understanding. And as far as I know, there is nothing, the pushback against feminism is that feminism has taken itself to the extreme. So it's no longer about the right to vote and women having the same equal rights as men. It's now tearing down men. Masculinity is toxic all of a sudden, right? It is now women just doing crazy, immoral stuff. It's not even a disingenuous argument because this is literally what is happening. You go on the internet now and it's literally soft porn everywhere. Like, is this like so? That is why there is no a pushback, because they're like, oh, we need to bring back shame. We need to, and so that is why there is now this call to go back to traditional values. That is why we're having this conversation, because you guys, we gave you an inch and you took a whole country. And it has devalued society. It has taken society into the bowels of immorality. And we're saying we need to wrestle it back from you because, we left you to your own devices and you have not been responsible with the freedom that we gave you. And it's not that we want to take back the freedom, it's that you need to tone it down a bit. We need to, settle and come back in where, there is some decency and there is some morality and there is some sense of pride, and, that's the end game. It's not to say, oh, you can't vote and oh, you can't, be independent and have your job out. That's not what we're trying to say. We're saying it's gone too far. You've taken it too far, my lady. You need to reel it back. Keep your clothes on. Cover up. Have some dignity. Have some pride. Have some self-respect. That is what the quote-unquote anti-feminists, as you call them, are saying. That's the end game. What is your end game? Because what we're seeing now is not it. What is going on here cannot continue. That's the point. So what is your solution? Because the pushback is going to continue. Just like when women couldn't vote, you fought until you got the right to vote because it was unfair. The level of sexual immorality in the society cannot continue the way it is. So what is your solution to that? Because if women should be able to do whatever it's not going to happen there. Because men are not allowed to do what they want. That is why you fought for the right to vote. That is why you fought for the right for equal representation. That is why you fought for the right to go to work. That is why you fought for the right to own property. Because men were not allowed to do whatever the hell they want. So you cannot therefore turn around now and say women should be allowed to do whatever the hell they want. You can't have your cake and eat it too, my dear. Pick a struggle. So decide what is the end game. Because if you're satisfied with the way feminism is right now, then something is clearly wrong with you. And that is why we're having this conversation. That is why there is the pushback. That is why the conversation has been resurrected. So the ball is in your court. What is it? What do you want?